Today we're going to look at William Golding's The Lord of the Flies. In particular, the key themes of the story and the characterizations of the main characters. So let's start into one of the major themes, such as the descent into savagery. Now, the chapters of the novel are all symbolically titled and themselves signal the boys' descent into savagery. It can be helpful to reference the chapter titles in your notes should a question on this theme come up. For example, maybe perhaps to review the key moments in the novel which represent the boys' descent into savagery, and maybe to revise the main characteristics and representations of the key characters. So let's look at some of the main events that start signaling that we're looking at theme. In the second chapter, we never get the boy's name, but we call him the boy with the birthmark, and he starts talking about a beastie, how when he was off in the woods, he thought he saw some sort of monster, some sort of beastie out in the woods, and people almost immediately tell him, no, there's no such thing as a beastie, not on an island this small. Secondly, when we start hunting for pigs, we do see that Jack begins to paint his face and begins to do a war dance in order for, preparing himself to go on this hunt. Now, the first time we have a ship passing the island, remember these kids are stuck on the island, they'd like to get rescued, we have created a fire on the top of the island, and usually we have the fire constantly going, we are prepared to make it bigger, but the first time a ship actually passes the island, the fire is out. We weren't prepared. Again, when we see Jack challenging a sense of authority, we are now wondering whether or not Jack wants to be the leader himself. And so Jack breaks off from Ralph's authority and from the main section of the boys and goes off alone. And he's soon joined by a lot of his other older choir boys. And so once Jack now has his hunters with him, now that he has his own gang, they go out and they kill a pig and they put a head on a stick, sharpened at both ends. They say, for the beast, almost like as if they're leaving it to placate or to help the beast, come on their side. After that, we start seeing the real descent into savagery when we have the first death on the island that we are aware of that comes at the hands of the other boys, and that would be Simon. Simon is going to be killed by the other boys during a storm. And then Jack's gang, since they would like to be able to cook their food, they steal Piggy's glasses, which leaves the first group of boys, not only without Piggy's sight, but without their fire. And then we get into our second death, our second character of Piggy. He dies after Ralph's gang's attempt to reason with Jack. We see Roger then using a stone and killing Piggy. Sam and Eric, the only couple of boys who were left in Jack's tribe, they are forced to join Jack's tribe, and they tell Ralph that Roger has now sharpened a stick at both ends. If you recall on the previous slide, we put the pig's head on that sharpened stick at both ends. And when Sam and Eric tell Ralph that Roger has made another sharpened stick at both ends, and now they're coming and looking for Ralph, he's a smart kid. He understands what's about to happen. And so Jack's gang begins to hunt Ralph down. So let's take a look at those key characters themselves. And remember that the maximum age of the boys is 12. So your older boys like Ralph, certainly Jack, are going to be 12 years of age. I mean, a very young age in the first respect, and everyone else is going to be even younger than that. So our main character that we follow throughout the story is Ralph. Now, Ralph's appearance, he looks very tall, he's got blonde hair, he's athletic. He also seems to be confident, and he's almost this natural-born leader, perhaps because he's taken a lead from his father, who is a naval officer. He seems to be that type of a character who's got enough confidence to be able to lead others, especially in a sense of crisis like the boys are in. Now, when we look at his relationships with others, most people look up to him, specifically Piggy, who needs to have somebody look out for him since he has a tendency to be bullied by the other boys. He also seems to be quite friendly with Jack, the other confident leader on the island. At least for a good part of the beginning of the story, the two boys are friends. Some of the key points about Ralph himself. We start looking a little bit at the themes when we look at the characterization. Does Ralph represent the good in mankind? I mean, every character has a flaw, but is Ralph our quote-unquote good guy? Now, he is portrayed as the epitome of the stereotype protagonist. He's tall, he's fair-skinned, he's got blonde hair and blue eyes, and considering our setting is during World War II, it's very ironic that he is quite Aryan-featured. The idea of that he would look like a stereotypical star, somebody that would be looked upon as attractive in Europe at the time period. He and Jack are binary oppositions of one another, where we see Ralph as being a very confident leader from the start. Jack seems kind of awkward. Where we see Ralph looking fairly attractive and natural-born leader, we see Jack unable to convince people he's a good leader, and he's not as attractive. We see these binary oppositions between the idea of Ralph and the idea of Jack. Now, Ralph is elected the leader, but it's not forceful enough to maintain the position. There's a couple of kids who really would like Ralph to be the leader, and the rest just kind of go along because they need somebody in charge. He seems to be confident. Let's let him be the leader. He's eventually reduced in the book to the status of an outcast who must flee for his life after he loses a lot of his tribal members over to Jack's rival tribe. And then after Jack starts killing off some of the members of his tribe, Ralph eventually finds himself as an outcast on the run. Now, a lot of times when Ralph is by himself, because we are in third-person omniscient, we're able to look into his mind, and a lot of times we see him as an idealist and a dreamer. Even though he's the leader in charge, he doesn't come up with the ideas. It's Piggy who does all the thinking for him. Piggy's the one who believes maybe we should take down the names of the kids, maybe we should see how many people are still alive, maybe we should start making shelters, maybe we should make a fire to get rescued. Piggy comes up with the ideas, and Ralph is the one who's going to instruct people to do it. Now, at the end of the novel, he becomes almost the opposite. He's a disillusioned realist who now sees the world and its inhabitants for what they really are. The fact that people would rather work for themselves instead of a sense of community. How you're looking out for number one and for no one else first and foremost. Let's move on to our second character, which would be Piggy. We never get the boy's real name. We get almost from the start in chapter 1 that other people in his school called him that, and so Ralph and Jack pick up the moniker. Now, his appearance is fat, he's asthmatic, he's short-sighted, that's why he's still wearing his glasses. However, in order to combat that, he also is the likely most intelligent and sensible person on the entire island. If somebody should be in charge of the rest of these boys, it should be Piggy. After all, he's one who teaches Ralph how to blow the conch and how to lead. He suggests making a list of names. He suggests the fire on top of the island to get rescued. His background is that he's an orphan and lives with his aunts. So when we start talking about the close relationship that Jack, was having with a sense of his father and how he loves his mom, we don't get a lot of that from Piggy because he always talks about his auntie and how his auntie is always scolding him to do something or something else. He also has a different accent to the others, which kind of tells us that perhaps all of the other boys came from a prep school. They might know each other. They're from all of the similar or same communities and classes. Piggy is not. Piggy is not from their communities and classes, so perhaps he, now living with his aunt, has just moved into this community or this school recently. His relationships with others, he does well by Ralph, but he fears Jack, and Jack sees that fear and instantly turns it on him in order to bully him. And he is taunted by others because of his nickname of Piggy. Piggy's key points: he is the stereotypical victim in the novel because of who he is. His characterizations of being overweight, asthmatic, and short-sighted definitely point to, for somebody who needs to be pretty physical on the island, people are going to pick on him for that. He's represented as being of a lower class than the other boys, and he consequently speaks and acts differently. Because his accent is different, because he doesn't speak in complete English, he is going to be made fun of because he just looks and he sounds different. Ironically, as you listen to him, however, he's the boy who speaks the most sense. He is quite intelligent, he's thoughtful for the other boys, he's able to reason and hypothesize and look ahead towards the future, which is what these boys need if they're going to survive and get rescued. He is a paternal figure who looks after and supports the little ones. Most of the bigger boys on the island could care less what happens to the little ones on the island. Piggy at least worries for them and says we need to take care of them. Now he becomes a wise counselor who supports Ralph's attempts at a democratic parliamentary rule. After all, if we're in a democratic parliamentary rule, Piggy does get to have his say. He can make sure that the little ones are being cared for, so he certainly wants Ralph to stay in charge. Which also means he increasingly finds himself at odds with Jack, a person who he instinctively fears and loathes. And it is Jack's subordinate Roger, who does anything and everything that Jack says, who is going to crush Piggy with the boulder. Lastly, you're going to want to note how sight is metaphorically and literally associated with Piggy. His glasses help give us the fire, so for the rest of us, those glasses are quite important. Now, literally, his sight is important to Piggy, so he needs those glasses in order to see. But there's also a metaphor that goes along with that sense of glasses for Piggy. He's the one that has sight. He's the one with vision. Not just because he can see, but the fact that he's looking ahead. Moving on to another main character, we have Jack. Jack is tall and thin, he's got red hair and freckles, and he constantly wears a mean expression. Probably goes along with his characteristics of being bossy and rude. One of the very first times we see him, he has, on a very hot day, his choir boys marching in step, one after the other in a line behind him, fully dressed in their choir robes. And they do it. He's very bossy and rude, and he orders them about. His relationships with the others, he seems to dominate the choir. Whatever Jack wants done, they will do it for him. He likes Ralph at first. He sees another guy who's very confident, who other people take to as very friendly. He takes an immediate dislike to Piggy, however, and begins to bully him. And so there is going to be this love-hate relationship with Ralph for a while, because Ralph does stick up for Piggy, and he does not want Ralph to do that. So sooner or later, they're just going to come to odds. Some of Jack's key points that we have, since Ralph is quote-unquote our good guy in the story, if he represents a sense of good, is Jack meant to represent the evil or the worst in people? Jack's physical appearance serves as a warning sign. He's got flame red hair, he's got a pale face, he's got this disposition that always makes him frown. Kind of makes you wonder, is he supposed to be the negative portion of this story? Now, he is used to taking up a leadership position, first as the leader of the choir, and then he becomes the leader of the hunters, and then eventually takes a leadership in his own tribe. And he's the one responsible for splitting the initial group. He does this by terrorizing them and offering them a tempting life of hunting and plenty of meat. If you don't want to be bossed around by Ralph, if you don't want to have to listen to Piggy, come my way and we'll hunt and we'll eat and we'll party all night long, is Jack's kind of iota. Now, his leadership results in a dictatorship where he rules his tribe with fear. So as soon as you join, it's not all roses and sunshine. He is going to order you around, and if you don't follow the rules, fear comes afterwards. Now, Jack is a spontaneous individual. If he wants something, he wants it right now. He has desires, and he wants them instantly gratified. He doesn't think through his consequences of his action as Ralph does, and puts himself first at all times. Usually it works out for Jack. Sometimes it doesn't work out for others. He is amoral. He only enforces the sense of justice that he feels is right now. And so if it's working out good for him, it doesn't really matter if it's going to work out for everybody. The next character that we see throughout the story is Simon. Simon actually is one of the choir boys that follows along behind Jack, at least initially, and he can't handle the hot weather with all of that wool on him. And that's because of his appearance. He's small, he's physically frail. We also have black hair and bright eyes on Simon. He's probably one of the youngest ones in the choir group. He's also a bit opposite when it comes to Jack from his character. He's very kind and helpful. He wants to make sure that the shelters are being built. He wants to make sure that the island is explored. However, even though he's willing to do all the hard work, he's an introvert. He does not want to speak in assemblies, and a lot of times when other people are just frightened to go off into nature, especially by themselves, he happily goes off into nature by himself and goes exploring. His relationships towards others, he's looked on as being strange. That how could you love this nature? You're supposed to be scared of a beastie, because he's always off by himself and he doesn't explain himself because he's quite silent. People look at him as strange. He's also extremely loyal towards Piggy and Ralph. He knows who good leaders are and he wants to help them out. Some of Simon's key points. He seems to be mysterious, and because of his dark appearance, the other boys find him odd or queer. He goes barefoot almost immediately. He throws off all of his choir clothes almost immediately, and so he's quite an isolated figure. And Golding deliberately is going to make Simon into a Christ-like figure. It's not coincidental. The author specifically tells us afterwards, when he talks about his book, that he's made Simon into a Christ-like figure. The idea of boys looking at him as being very helpful and kind and in a leadership position, and at the same time very odd, very strange. We don't trust him, and so therefore he will be the first to die. He is helpful and cooperative and the only boy to help Ralph build the shelters, and it's interesting that he's one of the three boys who initially explores the island. Jack and Ralph, and their confidence and being the older boys, they are sent off, and Simon happily runs along after them. He wants to go and explore this nature. Now, he has a marked physical weakness in that he appears to suffer from epilepsy, which sometimes is also associated with prophetic qualities. So as he gets warm and he starts getting into his epileptic seizures, he starts seeing visions. Now, he also has the high level of intuitive intelligence. This allows him to confront the boys' fears about the beasts. Simon doesn't speak often. When he does, you want to listen to him. Most times when he's speaking, it's about when people have fears, people don't understand what's going on the island. He wants to kind of allay that fear and try and tell them there is no such thing as a beast. We're all here to help one another out, and he confronts their fears. He is an original member of the choir, and he's ultimately killed by the choir. He is killed by boys that know him. So when we look at our next character of Roger, usually when you think of the first four main characters, such as Ralph, Piggy, Simon, and Jack, they're the ones we look at as major characters. But Roger I've stuck in because he and the next boys are going to be somewhat elemental towards the plot line. The first thing about Roger that we notice is that he has a gloomy face. The boy is never positive. He's never in a happy sight. And he also has dark hair, but his character is very quiet and secretive. Now, Simon himself is quiet as well, but he's introverted. He will speak when he needs to. Roger doesn't speak. He has a tendency to keep his mind and thoughts to himself. And he's extremely cruel. He's a very opposite to Simon. He enjoys picking on the little ones. There's one point where he decides to throw rocks intending to miss the little ones, and then he throws rocks in the same scene, intending to hit them and hurt them. He is also a choir boy, and he's allied with Jack. He happily will do anything and everything that Jack wants, even more so when he becomes more cruel. Some of Roger's key points. He's very mysterious. He's very secretive. He is very cunning and very planning. As Jack's lieutenant, he comes to think like Jack, and he doesn't question the consequences of his actions. Now, the name of Roger literally means famous with a spear, and when we start hearing how Roger is sharpening sticks at both ends in order to create spears, it means something. Now, he is a sadist. A sadist is someone who delights in inflicting pain. He is absolutely unnecessarily cruel in the sow killing incident, where we see a sow with her baby pigs. He not only kills off the sow because, they would like meat, but then the way he treats the carcass afterwards is just absolutely cruel. So you start wondering, is he an extension of Jack's character? Jack is supposed to be our quote-unquote bad guy, but Jack does have some redeeming qualities. Roger has no redeeming qualities, so is he a bit of an extension of the evil that's coming from Jack? And of course, he's the guy who prepares that stick with sharpened at both ends. Lastly, let's look a little bit at the setting and atmosphere of the island. The setting for the novel is a traditional paradise island, an Eden-like utopia upon first glance. And it's interesting that this is soon superseded by the darkness of man's heart, causing the island to become a dystopian prison reflected in the description. This is supposed to be a wonderful island and a utopia, an Eden, a place where the boys should be well off. And yet we see that it becomes darker and darker and more foreboding and more mean and more evil as the story comes on. The island is initially unspoiled by man, and it's important that the passenger jet makes the first scar across its surface because it becomes corrupt by mankind, and because the boys are now here, it will become even more corrupt as the story continues on. Well, there are a lot of our themes and symbols for the story of The Lord of the Flies by William Golding. Thank you so much for stopping by the channel. If you'd like to learn any more about The Lord of the Flies, please leave a like and a comment down below. Let me know what you'd like to hear more. And I'd sure appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel. Thanks for stopping by.